Hello. We are about to finish Gordon Corman's book 2 of the Island series, Survival. Chapter 17, Day 9, 340. Luke stared at him. An atomic bomb? Ian nodded. It was all in this documentary on the Manhattan Project, where they invented the first two nuclear weapons back in World War II. They were supposed to build three bombs, code name Fat Man, Little Boy, and Junior. But the war ended after Fat Man and Little Boy were dropped, so Junior never had to be built. He waved the envelope in Luke's face. That installation was going to be used to launch Junior, the third atomic bomb. Luke looked doubtful. And the Air Force just forgot this place. Wasn't a real base, Ian reasoned. There were only bunks for about 20 or 30 people. All they needed were a couple of planes and some place to land them. The concrete, exclaimed. That was their runway, right? And it just got busted up and overgrown after 50 years? Probably, Ian agreed. He looked scared. You don't think they're going to miss this envelope, do you? The smugglers, I mean? That would tip them off that we're here. They don't care about paper, Luke assured. Not unless there's money printed on it. But man, was that a close call or what? I'm still shaking, Ian admitted. Soon they spotted Charla in the lookout tree. What took you guys so long? Don't ask, groaned Luke. The powwow was held on the beach over bananas and coconut milk. You know, this is really fascinating history lesson, yawned JJ, but who cares about what happened in some ancient war? Come up with a fully charged cell phone and you've got my attention. Unfortunately, Luke said grimly, that old war affects us more than you think. Tell him, Ian. I've been going through those papers, Ian explained tragically. Ella, are you done with fast forward? Okay, then you need to get on HMH and go to your assignments, because I know you have assignments on HMH, okay? I've been going through those papers, Ian explained tragically. As near as I can tell, this installation was so top secret that they picked an island that was never on any maps. So I don't think we should depend on anyone coming to rescue us because, technically, we're nowhere. Lou could almost hear the slurping sound as the very last ounce of hope was sucked out of the castaways. They fell into a gloomy silence that was broken only by the steady lapping of the ocean. Will's stomach yawned wide open, sore and empty. It was the mac and cheese, he thought miserably. Before that day, he hadn't known how starved he really was, but the mac and cheese, that beautiful, delicious, terrible mac and cheese, bliss for a few hours, and then the payback. The meal had served only to awaken the monster of his hunger. That's how it seemed to him, a living creature loose inside him and impossible to control. It had started as a rumbling in his belly and had grown to a roar that was drowning out everything else around him. He had tried gorging himself on bananas, dozens of them, but the sheer quantity made him sick, and still his hunger raged. No, it was beyond hunger now, it was desperation. A numbing terror rose from the tips of his toes as the fact of his helplessness became clear. He was becoming weaker every hour. Soon he wouldn't be able to act, to rescue Liza, or even to save himself. All alone in the jungle, there was only one person he could lead, one way it could end. He was going to die. But I'm not all alone. His fever gazed fell on the boar, curled up and snoring between the twin palms. Ratface's food. Ratface. He reached for his bow and pulled an arrow back against the string, but go close. That'll give you a quick kill. He stopped short. How could you even think of killing Ratface? The boar had only been a friend these last few days, maybe the final days of Will's whole life. Food. That's what all that mattered. This wasn't about friendship. This was a matter of survival. He drew back the arrow. Harder. He extorted himself. If the first shot reached the brain, there'd be no suffering. His eyes filled with tears. I'm sorry, Ratface, he whispered. As soon as the name passed his lips, he had started an image of a blurry, sour looking sailor standing on the deck of a ship. It was so vivid that Will could actually make out the word painted on the man's life jacket Phoenix. Shocked. He relaxed his grip on the bowstring. The arrow snapped off the stretched vine, its dull end hitting him in the eye. Ow. He staggered a little, but hardly noticed the pain over what was going on in his head. It all came rushing back with the force of the runaway train, the other kids, the storm, the explosion, the shipwreck, and those terrible days of drifting on the raft, parched and starving, not knowing if his sister Liza was alive or dead. He felt a great swell of joy in his chest. She wasn't dead. He had seen her and talked to her. That was real, wasn't it? And the others too. By some miracle, they had all survived the sinking of the Phoenix and had drifted to the same place, wherever it was. The others. He'd been hiding for them, calling them liars and kidnappers, stealing their food, vandalizing their camp, and their only purpose had been to help him. They must think I'm crazy. He considered this. They were right. He was crazy, or at least he had been. Not anymore. Come on, Ratface, he exclaimed excitedly. The boar woke and shot him a questioning look. Let's go. He ran up into the jungle, Ratface trotting along at his heels. Chapter 18. Going okay? Okay. Day 9, 4:05 p.m. Smell was a problem for those that lived on the island. In the heat and humidity, just the regular chores of day-to-day survival wrung the perspiration out of the 5 castaways. Someone was always battling jock itch or athlete's foot or a weird tropical fungus. If it hadn't been for their easy access to the ocean, the stink of the whole group would have been unbearable. It was always harder to notice on yourself. Luke risked a sniff when nobody was looking. P.U. The mud of him and Ian's tunnel out of the hut and the sweat of their desperate escape had mingled with jungle steaminess to create a pretty strong funk. Bathing was always the trick, a tricky tightrope to walk. With the girls around, Luke wanted his privacy, but he didn't want to be like Ian. The kid was so shy that he would go miles up the beach, and a simple bath would end up taking him all day. He walked along the shore, past the can opener, to where the sand gave away to a rocky coral. He kicked off his shoes and dove through the incoming breaks, letting his clothes wash on his body. He was no expert swimmer like Charla, but he enjoyed the ocean. This was the only good thing about being shipwrecked, he reflected. No beach at home was super perfect water. No beach at home had such perfect water, clear as glass, with not the slightest trace of murkiness of pollution. He pulled off his shirt and swished it through the waves like a washing machine agitator. Then he wrung it and spread it on the rocks to dry. Next, he wringed out his shorts and underwear and did the same. Then he went for a long swim. The water felt cool and refreshing, and some of the tensions loosened in his neck and shoulders. Even though it was deep here, he could clearly see plants and rocks and starfish on the bottom, 10 feet below. Peace. The ocean was the only place he ever found it, where he could free his mind from the terrible danger all around him. He didn't forget his problems here, but he could somehow separate himself from them. There were times where he could even remember the old Luke Haggerty, the one from way back before the avalanche of troubles had started with the lousy locker inspections. He could lose himself in the pounding of the surf and searching gulls, the rustling of the wind through the palm fronds, the hooting of an owl. An owl? The signal. Luke must have swum, but he didn't remember a second of it. The next thing he knew, he was scrambling into the corals, cutting his feet, shins, knees to the ribbons as he leaped into his shorts. Then he was pounding up the beach. He could see the fellow castaways performing their 2-minute drill. The wind roared in his ears as he sprinted. That and a different terrifying sound, the approaching bark of a hunting dog. He arrived at the scene at the same time as Charla. 2 men, she hissed, pushing over the dismantled still, and the Doberman. Luke was proud of the group. There was panic in their eyes, but their bodies were pure efficiency. The stills disappeared beneath the beach. Their footprints were wiped clean. Then, into the woods, where they flattened the lifeboat, they pulled the palm blanket on top of it. By now, men's voices could be heard along with the barking. The castaways melted into the underbrush. What's the deal with this dog? It's going crazy. They were no more than 100 feet away. Crouched next to Luke, Charla froze in shock. The horror. The fish, she breathed. We forgot to open the stinky fish. The dog smells us. Too late, thought Luke. What he heard next turned the blood in his veins to ice. It's on to something, the other men said excitedly. Let go of the leash. A split second later, Luke caught sight of the brown and black Doberman bounding through the underbrush, fangs bare. It was 50 feet away, then 30. Beside him, he heard Charla gasp. His mind worked furiously. What could they do? He came up blank. For the first time, the castaways had truly arrived at zero options. Their adventure was ending right here, right now. At a moment, a guided missile shot out of the bushes and slammed full force into the dog. It all happened so fast. For a second, Luke had no idea what was going on. He only knew that instead of being savaged by a vicious animal, he was still in hiding, watching a monumental struggle. Then he heard a squeal. The wild boar, he whispered. The fight was furious and deadly. The boar's head pumped up and down like a pile driver as it slashed at the dog with its tusk. The Doberman lunged and growled, biting at the enemy's throat with razor sharp fangs. The boar was bigger, much heavier, but the Doberman was faster and more agile, leaping up to tear at the thick neck. The boar's head weaved back and forth, slashing at the dog's exposed underbelly. Blood began to spatter, but it was impossible to tell which animal was coming from. Terrible howling, and suddenly the dog was on the bottom. The boar was in charge. All at once, the two men came rushing through the underbrush. Red Hair was in the lead. What the? He raised his pistol, fired a shot into the boar's neck. With a squeal that was half rage, half surprise, the boar pulled back from the Doberman and raised its massive, blood streaked head. The second man pulled the weapon too, and he and Red Hair opened fire. It was a scene straight out of a gangster movie, shot after shot, bullets flying. Luke tried to burrow himself into the soft ground. The boar advanced one menacing step and then became seemingly boneless, collapsing in a heap among the vines, dead. The two men ran up to where the lifeless Doberman lay. Marissa, are you working? It doesn't look like it. I can't believe it. Red Hair was furious. That fat tub of lard was going to blow its blubber over this dog. All this for nothing. His partner agreed in disgust. It was smelling this ugly hog all along. That's good news, Red Hair commented. At least we can leave this godforsaken bug farm. As the two started back through the jungle, he reached out one heavy boot and kicked the dead boar. Stupid pig. Luke's mind was reeling, but he forced himself to remain perfectly still. All would be lost if one of them jumped up too soon before the smugglers were out of range. It was only 10 minutes, but it felt like 2 lifetimes. There was a rustle of foliage. Liza crept out of hiding and stood over the body of the boar. It saved our lives. One by one, the other castaways emerged from the underbrush. But why would it fight for us? Asked Charla. Maybe he just didn't like Dobermans, Luke suggested. I don't know. JJ looked into the boar's open, unseeing eyes. We'll call it even on the mac and cheese, okay? Charla slouched him on the shoulder. Well, it's just a pig, he defended himself. All at once, they heard a whimper. Everybody froze. Luke put his fingers to his lips. There it was again. A weak sigh, barely a breath. Definitely human. They looked around. Where could it be coming from? The two men were gone. The castaways were all accounted for. And then Ian tripped on something. He gawked. Luke! There, beneath the low fern, beneath the low fern lay Will Greenfield, white and still. Ian felt for a pulse. It was strong and steady. Oh my God. Liza dropped to one knee beside her brother. A tattered cuff of Will's shorts was soaked red. She pulled the fabric up. Beneath it was a bullet wound just above the thigh. So now Will has been shot by those people on accident. Like, they didn't know they shot him, but literally they could not have more things wrong with their lives. Okay, now he's getting shot. Like, can't survive forever with a bullet wound. Oh, Will, she said, shaking her head. Why is it always you? His eyes fluttered open. Don't yell at me, he said faintly. I didn't do it on purpose. He waved. Hi, Luke, Ian, Charla, JJ. Long time no see. You know us? Blurted Charla. Will was sheepish. I do now. Did you guys see Ratface? Ratface? Repeated Luke in disbelief. Not that Ratface, he explained. I've got a pet boar. Liza put his hand on his arm. No, you don't, she said gently. Not anymore. But it was a real hero, Will. You can be proud of it. Oh. Will looked sad. Suddenly he winced in pain, grabbing his wounded leg. Man, that hurts, he groaned. How bad is it? Instinctively, they all turned to Ian. The younger boy backed off. How should I know, he added, but there's no exit wound, so the bullet must still be in there. He needs a doctor. They don't make jungle calls, JJ reminded him. I'll get the first aid kit. Hang in there, Liza encouraged her brother. You're going to be just fine. She was grateful that he couldn't see how little she believed her own words. We are heading into our final chapter, chapter 19. It is day 10 on the island, 11:35 a.m. The stills were up again, their small fires burning, not on the beach, just inside the trees. In their midst lay Will, stretched out on a small piece of cabin top that miraculously delivered 4 of the castaways from the burning, sinking ship to the safety of the island. Hey, Lice, I never said thank you for blowing up the boat. You were the one who was supposed to be ventilating the engine room, his sister retorted. Shut up and rest. It was a pointless argument, but somehow it felt comfortable to the bickering again. She checked the bandage of his wounded leg, not having the slightest idea what she was looking for. She said. She joined Ian, who picked up heavy seeds out of the drains and setting them aside for roasting. The ocean had to be The ocean has to be out of fish before I eat those things, she commented sourly. Ian looked grave. We've got to get your brother off this island. Will's just a big complainer, she pointed out. That's how he's getting better. The bleeding has finally stopped. The boy shook his head seriously. There's going to be an infection for sure with that bullet in there. It's no big deal if we can get medical attention, but our first aid stuff is going to run out fast. Liza blinked. He could die? He shrugged helplessly. Not tomorrow, not next week. But if we can't get him to a hospital. Liza, called Will from the raft. Could you get me some water? You got legs, she snapped automatically. It was so so instinctive for her to take a shot at him. The result of 12 years of sibling warfare. Practically every detail of her life existed to be the opposite of something about Will. He struggled in school, so she slaved for stray days. He was cautious, so she tried to be impulsive. What would she do without him? In a bizarre way, they were a team. They were even named as a pair, after flowers, Sweet William and Sweet Alyssum. Alyssum? A cheesy move by their parents, she always thought, but now it seemed wiser and more telling that Liza would ever imagine. What would she do without Will to fight with, to push off against? Would she just disappear? I mean, she wasn't going to cry. No way, not in front of Will. I mean, coming right up. She ran for the water keg. Anything you want. You just ask. The twin plane the twin engine plane left first, carrying away Red Hair and his two colleagues. Mr. Big left on the second aircraft. By this time, his white suit was a mess of wrinkles and sweaty soil. He was broken up by the death of his Doberman. If he was broken up by the death of his Doberman, he gave no sign. Luke, JJ, and Charlo watched from their usual spying place as the single engine plane rose from the water, carrying its illegal cargo of Tuscan animal parts to who knows where. Think they'll be back? Asked Charla. Count on it, said Luke. This is the perfect meeting place for an exchange like that. Why do you think they needed to make sure there wasn't anyone here but them? After so many days of hiding, it felt almost unnatural to be able to run down the coral bluffs to the beach without fear of the smugglers. Luke kicked off his shoes and dipped his toe in the warm water of the lagoon. It was hard to believe that only a week had passed since they had witnessed Rathead executing one of his own men in this very spot. JJ skipped a flat rock on the surface of the lagoon. Well, we've got the run of this place now. We can throw wild parties. Too bad there's nobody to invite but a bunch of snakes. We can get rescued, Charla corrected pointedly. This is our big chance until the smugglers come back. If we blow this, her voice trailed off. Once again, Luke used the footprints on the beach to guide to find the hidden military installation. Even though he'd been there before, the jungle was so dense in the Quonset hut was virtually invisible until the castaways were standing right in front of it. Marissa, are you working? Every time I look at you, you don't seem to be working. JJ stepped inside and looked around with a distaste. What a dump, he said sourly. Man, remind me to never join the army. Charlo's eyes were wide. It's hard to believe that all this was here to kill people. There was a war on, Luke reminded her. Yeah, but one bomb wiping out a whole city? She shook her head sadly. It's scary what we've taught ourselves to do. Luke noted that the sleeping bags were no longer on the benches. A newspaper lay folded over on the side of the seats. He flipped it open. USA Today from July 25th, the day the first group of traffickers had arrived on the island. Luke's jaw dropped. Guys, there at the top of the front page was Mr. Radford, the mate of the Phoenix. The photograph showed him being pulled out of a battered, dingy sailor on a Chinese freighter. As the others gathered around, Luke began to read. Heroic mate fought in vain to save kids on sinking boat. That's the title of the news article. And we all know that that's a lie. He did not try to save them. He left them. J.J. Lane, son of actor Jonathan Lane, is one of 6 youths lost at sea and presumed dead after the sinking of the Phoenix, the flagship of charting a new course, a renewed sailing program for troubled kids. James Cascaden, 61 captain of the 60-foot schooner, was also lost in the accident, which took place near typhoon conditions 500 miles northeast of Guam. According to Calvin Radford, 37, the only survivor, the tragedy began to unfold when Lane, 14, inexplicably tried to raise sails at the height of the storm. At that point, winds gust up to 70 knots and 40 feet waves tore the boat into splinters, according to Radford. He was a crazy kid. Maybe Hollywood does it to them, but he didn't deserve to die Like that, Radford said emotionally. None of them did. Luke Haggerty, 13, of Harbinsville, MA. Charla Swan, 12, of Detroit, Michigan. Ian Sackerty, 11, of Lake Forest, Illinois. And Will Greenfield, 13, and his sister Liza, 12, of Huntington, New York, were the other victims. Radford, the Phoenix's mate, fought desperately to save the 6 young people after Kinskating was swept overboard by a freak wave. It was only after the schooner sank out of sight he climbed aboard the 12-foot Dignity and would sail for 8 days and more than 200 miles before being rescued by Wuling, the freight out of Shanghai en route to Honolulu. When called a hero, Radford broke down in tears. Those kids were my responsibility. I should have found a way to save them. The Maritime Commission has submitted his name for the highest medal of bravery. Jonathan Lane could not be reached for comments, but according to the spokesman, Dave Radford, so Mr. Radford said that he tried to save them, but they're all dead. He couldn't find them. They sank, and then he sailed away. Hey, Mr. Radford. So that was in the newspaper. So all these 6 kids are now finding out that everyone thinks they're dead. Luke put the paper down, shaking with rage. I'm speechless, he seethed. Ratface, a hero. What he did to us? Will's Ratface had more heroism in his little fingers, Charla agreed emotionally, you know? If boars had fingers. JJ shook his head. My dad made a comment through a spokesman, he chuckled. A spokesman. It's totally like him that they almost had me fooled. Charla stared at him. What are you talking about? If CNC could sink our boat and strand us on an island, the actor's son explained, then it's definitely no big deal to print a fake issue of USA Today. Luke waved the paper in his hand. They interviewed my mom about me being dead, he seethed. Is that real enough for you? She's in on it, JJ argued. All of our parents are. They're the ones who sent us to this sleepaway camp. Charlie was furious. I can't believe you're still talking about this. Poor Will has got a bullet in his leg. You think that's part of CNC's plan? That must have been a mistake, JJ said seriously. It could have been our ticket out of here. Sooner or later, they're going to have to call the whole thing off to get Will to a doctor. We just have to hang tough. Oh, we'll hang tough, all right, Luke vowed, but it has nothing to do with your idiot theories. We're going to hang tough so we can live to tell the world what Ratface did to us and watch him rot in jail for it. Ian had asked them to bring back whatever medical supplies they could find in hopes that they might be something that will help Will. They came up empty in the main building, but one of the smaller huts in the back turned out to be a dispensary, loaded down with bottles, bandages, sterile pads, and yellowed packets. The 3 started out on their return journey to their camp on the other side of the island. They had been walking only a few minutes when, all at once, JJ disappeared. One minute he was striding ahead of the group, the next he was just gone. JJ, called Charla, mystified. Ella, I know you have not finished all of your stuff. I'm sure you still have more things. Go on Google Classroom. You could go on Homeroom. You could go on Reading. You could double check HMH. I know you are not done with everything. Marissa, be working, please. JJ, called Charla, mystified. Down here, came a strangely distant voice. Quit fooling around, Luke said sharply. We've got to get this stuff for Will. No, really. A hand reached up and parted the thick underbrush. They stared. JJ stood at the bottom of a large square pit, up to his knees with dirt and rotted leaves. Bottles and gauze pads were scattered everywhere. Is that supposed to be there? Asked Charla. It's like a trap or something. Sure trapped me, JJ shrugged, rubbing his head. I think I fractured my skull. JJ was impatient. If the fall didn't break those bottles, I'm sure your thick head's okay, too. There's something hard down here, JJ insisted. He began kicking the dirt on the pit. Then there was a dull clang. He jumped back. Ow! Luke frowned. That sounded like metal. He eased himself into the hole and reached up to help Charla after him. JJ was already digging at the earth and leaves of the mound at the center of the pit. A few inches below the surface, he stuck black metal with a smooth, round surface. The dirt came away easily, and the other 3 joined him in clearing off the strange object. It was huge, maybe 10 feet long, and far too heavy to budge. Sorry. The thing resembled a very tall black garbage can that fits with fins on each end. Let me guess, ventured JJ. It's chapstick for giants. Suddenly, Luke knew. There was no flash of inspiration, no light bulb going off in his brain. He simply looked at the object, and in that instant, realizing exactly what it was, involuntary, he took a step back. What's wrong? Asked Charla in concern. All of a sudden, you're pale as a ghost. I think, Luke began, shaking. I think we just found Junior. They goggled. Wide, staring eyes moved from Luke to the object and then back to Luke again. Charla was the first to speak. You're not saying. Luke nodded weakly. The Discovery Channel was wrong. They did build it, and they left it right here. This time, everybody stepped backwards. JJ plastered himself against the wall of the pit. A harsh reality dropped over the castaways like a smothering blanket. A hostile environment and dangerous enemies were only part of the problem. Their friend Will was beginning a fight for his life, and now thrown into the mix by some insane quirk of fate, an atomic bomb. That is the end of Survival. After Christmas break, we will start the third and final book. Can't wait. Bye, guys.